الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل واجعلنا من خيرة أمة سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت يا حي يا قيوم تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولمشائخنا ولجميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم إلى شرف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه الكرام، وإلى أرواح أئمة المجتهدين وعلماء المتقين وأولياء الصالحين الكاملين، خاصة لروح إمام الطريقة حجة الإسلام أبو حامد al-Ghazali قدس الله أسرارهم ونور الله قلوبهم وأراد الله علينا بفيضاتهم وبركاتهم دائما، وإلى جميع المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات، وتابع بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين، ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum to all of you who come from, how many here from Birmingham? Not that far? I promised it wasn't far. It wasn't far, was it? It's okay? Traveling here okay? Yeah? Good, mashallah. The idea is for as many people as possible to come from Birmingham, so those who are online, we only have a limited number of places on the online classroom, so the more of you who can come from Birmingham, the better. And being in the class is much better than listening to it at home, because you'd probably be in your pajamas, sitting in bed with a cup of tea in your hand. So you'll do much better here, inshallah. Okay. So welcome to the Imam Ghazali series. This is part of the sacred texts syllabus. So I'm assuming that most of you here are either sacred text students or you are my PTS students. What we're going to be doing, I'll go through it inshallah, what we'll be doing. But what I am certainly going to try to do is keep this to about an hour. I'm going to try to keep the class to about an hour long. So that it's not too strenuous or what have you for anyone. Okay. So today what we'll do is we'll introduce the course. We'll have a look at a sort of a rough timetable of where we're trying to get to and how we're going to try and get there. And the focus of today will be on the life of Imam Ghazali. If possible, we're going to also go through the earliest biography of Imam Ghazali, written by Abdul Ghafir al-Farisi. We'll see if we have the time to do that today, inshallah. Okay, so what are the objectives of this course, this series? This is a long series. It will run over several semesters, inshallah. The objectives are firstly a detailed study of the Imam's life and thought. The second is an appreciation for the impact of Ghazali's thinking and his output on the history of Islam. And then the major objective, which is an overview study of the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, his greatest work and one of the greatest works in Islam. I'm not going to talk too much about it now. We will introduce it inshallah when the work comes up. Suffice to say, however, that Imam Nawawi said, يَكَادُ الْإِحْيَاء الْقُرْآنِ, that the Ihya is almost the Qur'an. That is Imam Nawawi, the author of Riyadh al-Salihin, the author of the Arba'in al-Nawawi, the author of the greatest works of fiqh in the Shafi'i school, right? An unrivaled master of the late Islamic world. He said, يَكَادُ الْإِحْيَاء الْقُرْآنِ, the Ihya is almost the Qur'an. He and a number of other scholars have all made the same comment, which is, were all the books of Islam to be lost, and only the Ihya remain, it would suffice by itself to revive the religion. It would suffice by itself to preserve the religion. This is the text that we are going to be studying, but in order to get a good appreciation of the text, it is very important right off the bat that you understand about the author of the text. Okay? Knowing the author and knowing the perspective of the author and the outlook of the author, as well as the rank of the author, is important in order to gain a full appreciation of the text. In order to have husn al-i'tiqad. One of the adab of seeking knowledge is that one has husn al-i'tiqad, which means one has a good opinion of one's teacher. Alright? If you don't have a good opinion of your teacher, i.e., you assume that your teacher generally is sincere, that your teacher generally is knowledgeable, that by and large what he will tell you will be the correct positions rather than incorrect positions, and the guidance that he gives you will take you in the right direction rather than in the wrong direction. This is to have husn al-i'tiqad of your teacher. If you don't have this, what happens is, and many of us will have experienced this, you go and you sit in a lecture, you don't really know who the speaker is, you don't really have a particular relationship with the speaker, you don't know where the speaker stands. So what happens is, you sit there like this. Maybe not physically, but academically, you're sitting there thinking, yeah, I'll suss him out, I'll see. I'll see what he has to say, I'll think about it. Okay? Well, that's a healthy dose of skepticism, which is important. Alright? You don't want to do what Imam Ghazali calls taqalluf, which is to unthinkingly swallow everything that's given to you. That can be very problematic. But as you grow in your relationship with the teacher, you develop a relationship with the teacher. Okay? And that's almost a therapeutic relationship that you have with the teacher. So look, this guy knows what he's talking about, he is sincere, etc., etc. Our teacher in this course is Imam Ghazali. I'm the Qari. So, let me clarify my role. I'm not the teacher, I'm the Qari. In a traditional class of knowledge, what would happen is you'd have the teacher, and then you would have the Muqri or the Qari. The Qari is the one who reads the text. Okay? So he'll read the text, and so you will hear from him, and occasionally the teacher will interject and say, this is what this means, he'll explain it a bit further, he might add a different opinion, etc., etc. That's the way a traditional class operates. I'm hoping that some of you guys in the sacred text, as your Arabic improves, right, as your Arabic sort of improves and gets better, that actually in the classes we'll be able to do that in the traditional way, which is that you read, and I can sit back and relax and listen, and say, you read that wrong. Okay? That sort of thing. Because that's the way a class should work. But I am the Qari, the teacher is Ghazali. The teacher of this class is Ghazali. And as far as possible, once we get into the Ihya, we're going to keep this as far as possible. And it will be difficult for me, so you'll have to bear with me. But we're going to try to keep this as far as possible, Ghazali explaining himself. Ghazali explaining himself. Okay? So, given that, it is important that you guys have a husn al-i'tiqad for Imam Ghazali. That you have a good opinion of the Imam. That you have some idea of his makan, of his station among the scholars of Islam. Alright? But you also have an idea where he's coming from. Once you get into the Ihya, especially in the opening chapters, you will see that the Ihya is written in a very powerful voice. Now, a text has a voice. Prior to this, the students that were here before were reading from the Mukhtasar of Imam al-Quduri, great manual of Hanafi fiqh. And the voice of Imam al-Quduri when he is talking through his work is a very restrained voice. If this happens, this is what you do. If that happens, this is what you do. So we're talking about marriage, and he's saying, if husband and wife leave Islam together, their marriage remains valid. If the husband leaves Islam, then the husband and the wife remains in Islam, then the husband and wife are separated. And if, in certain circumstances, she is owed a mahar, in other circumstances, she's not owed a mahar. And he's just talking about it like that. There's no astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah in the text. There's nothing in the text that says, well, you shouldn't be leaving Islam. Why are you leaving Islam? There's nothing like that in the text, because the voice that Imam Quduri is bringing to this work of his is the voice of a qadi. He is instructing judges. If a case comes forward like this is how you rule it. So it's a very detached academic approach. Ghazali and most works of Islam that you'll study are written like that. Those of you who are studying the Deen, most works you study, that's how they're written. They're written academically. It's quite a dry voice. There's little emotion. It's very much a case of if this, then this, if that, then that. This is what we believe about this. This is why we believe it, and so forth. What you will find with Ghazali is that his voice is very different in the Ihya. He is passionate in the Ihya. He goes off on rants in the Ihya. Very academic rants, but rants nonetheless. He digresses. He'll bring in a particular point. And it's very charismatic. The way he speaks in the Ihya is very charismatic. Okay? It's, in fact, rather than being scholarly, it's more prophetic. Because the Prophet ﷺ didn't say, if this, then that, if that, then that. The Prophet ﷺ infused emotion into his words. Okay? To understand why Ghazali is talking in a certain way, for example, about fuqaha, about jurists, or about mutakallimin, about theologians, alright? You need to understand this. The rank of Ghazali as a faqih, the rank of Ghazali as a theologian. There's a particular point, for example, in the Book of Beliefs. And he's talking about why you shouldn't go too much into formal theology. And he says, take this advice from one who has plunged into these oceans and traversed them, who has accomplished everything that anyone in this field has accomplished, and who has come out of it feeling that he is wanting, that it has not strengthened his faith. Take this advice from one who has taken this road. And it's a cri de coeur in French. A cri de coeur is a cry from the heart. I know what I'm talking about. Listen to me. I've been down this road. I know where it leads. And that's how he speaks. But to understand that, you need to know about Ghazali. And one of the reasons we're going to spend quite a bit of time talking about Ghazali himself is because he himself is so candid about his internal life. We know much, much, much more about not just what Ghazali did in his life. This is what, if you read a biography of a scholar, they did this, and then they studied that, and then they went to this teacher, and then this happened, and then that happened, and then they were persecuted by this person, and then they went to this place, and that's how you study. With Ghazali, what you get is, and this is how I felt, and this is what was going through my head, and this is the hesitation I had. That's what you'll find with Ghazali, and so we can understand Ghazali as a man, as a human being with emotions like we have emotions, and that's a very important thing. So that when you read the Ihya, you understand that this is a human being talking to me. A great human being. He was a towering human being. But he was a human being. And that's important to understand. So we will look at Ghazali. We will look at his impact on the history of Islam. Ghazali is, if you had a list of the top 10 most influential Muslims in the history of Islam, Ghazali would be in the top 10. And that includes Abu Bakr and Umar and people like that. Okay? He's not a Sahaba. His rank in the eyes of God is necessarily beneath the rank of the least of the Sahaba. That's our Aqidah. We'll take that, inshallah, when we go through it. That's our Sunni Aqidah, that nobody can reach the rank of the Sahaba. But in terms of his influence, in terms of his impact, it's astonishing. He is one of the most influential figures in the entire history of our religion, and in the entire history of thought. In the entire history of thought, of human intellectual endeavor. Ghazali, in terms of, if you take a broader scope, and we will take a broader scope of history, Ghazali is up there with Aristotle. In shaping Western thought, he is up there with Aristotle, with St. Thomas Aquinas, with Immanuel Kant, and people like that. That's the rank of the person that we're talking about, and his importance. And that's why it's important for us to understand it as well. So, the bulk of the course, however, will be the study of the Ihya Ulumuddin itself. And we'll examine, we will look at the Mukhtasar, we will be going through the summary of the text, but we will examine relevant excerpts of the Ihya itself. So here, this here is the best edition of the Ihya Ulumuddin in Arabic. Okay, Dar al-Minhaj. This is the first of 10 volumes. Okay, so the Ihya is 10 volumes long in this edition. Okay, it's an enormous work. So that's why we're covering the summary. But what we will do is we will pick excerpts from the Ihya as we go through. So you get the voice of the Imam, especially in the book of knowledge, the first book of the Ihya, in the book of beliefs, the second book, then in the book of the wonders of the heart, which is book 21 out of 40 of the Ihya, and book 22, which is the book of discipline in the soul. These 4 works, we will spend probably a disproportionate amount of time on these works, because of their relative importance even within the Ihya itself. Okay. So what do we do? An initial overview of the life of the Imam, as well as understanding the political, social, and intellectual context of his time. Then we will look at an overview of Ghazali's literary output, because he didn't just write the Ihya, he wrote a whole lot of other books as well. And we're going to focus particularly on what's called his probably slightly inaccurately called his autobiography, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, best edition in English, Deliverance from Error by R.J. McCarthy. So these are books that you guys, if you can, you should try and get hold of them. It's a very good work. Fons Vitae, Deliverance from Error, R.J. McCarthy. If that sounds like a bit scary reading for you, then feel free to get the mini version. Imam Ghazali, A Concise Life. Had a quick flick through it yesterday and today. Seems quite nice. Yeah, a nice overview of Ghazali's life. That's bedtime reading. Right? This ain't bedtime reading. This is bedtime reading. Okay? We'll send it out, inshallah. We'll send it out. Imam Ghazali, A Concise Life, Albert. Just type in Albert to Amazon or something. And maybe if you actually, with these things, we might actually think about that if there are quite a few people that want copies, then maybe what we can do is get orders together and place a bulk order, and that might work better, actually. Okay. So, why are we going to look at political, social, intellectual context? Because it's important for you guys to know about. Alright? It's important to know what was happening in the Muslim world at the time. One of the foremost scholars of Ghazali, there are 2 great Ghazalians who live in England. Okay? Interestingly enough, one of them's in Cambridge, and the other's in Oxford. Alright? Cambridge, you've got T.J. Winters, Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad. Okay? If you see a book whose author is T.J. Winters, buy it. Okay? The second is lesser known, is Shaykh Afifi, Shaykh Muhammad Afifi al-Akiti. Okay? Who is a lecturer at Oxford University. So Shaykh Abdul Hakim Murad is the founder of the Cambridge Muslim College and a lecturer in divinities at Cambridge University. Shaykh Afifi is a lecturer at the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies, which is Oxford University. And these are the 2 great Ghazalians in England, basically. Okay. The other group of people, generally speaking, that have a great Ghazalian tradition and will know a lot about Ghazali are the students of the Habaib. So people like Shaykh Ibrahim Osi Efa, I'm talking about this country, Shaykh Ibrahim Osi Efa and his group, I suppose, because the way of the Habaib of Yemen is very Ghazalian. Okay, it's a very Ghazalian approach. One of the very few places where the Ihya is taught systematically, letter by letter, line by line, is in Tarim, in Yemen. Okay, Sheikh Habib Omar, as part of his Rawha, which is his afternoon session, will teach from the Ihya. Okay, all right. But understanding the political, social, intellectual context, very important. So Shaykh Afifi once mentioned to me, it's always a piece of wisdom I will always remember. He said the one thing that students of knowledge don't study, that they absolutely, absolutely must study, is history. Some of you will have heard me say this before. We don't study history. And because we don't study history, we study works out of their context. So here is Quduri, the Mukhtasar of Imam al-Quduri. This is its commentary. Okay? You go to a student of knowledge who said, I studied Quduri, and ask them when Imam Quduri lived. Just that. Ask them when he lived. He lived around the time of Ghazali, as it happened. He lived around and about the time of Ghazali. Okay? What was happening in the Muslim world at that time? What's important to know? When Ghazali, during his life, the Crusades occurred. Because the first crusade happened during the life of Ghazali. Okay? Less than 100 years after his passing away, the Mongols were ravaging the entire Eastern Islamic world. Okay? What was happening at his time? It's important to know so that you gain a sense of context. So that you can understand some of the discussions that take place. Why are they taking place? Why is he focusing on this? Because that was very relevant in his time. One of the great failures, you might say, of the Muslim educational system is the stripping it of context. I've got some friends from Syria, and I asked them, well, what history did you study? Can you recommend a good history? Remember this conversation? Can you recommend a good history textbook? And he's like, We did kind of study history. But most of the history when you're in the Arab world is, when does history start? What's the beginning of the dawn of history? Whenever that dictator took power. That's when history began. And you'll study in detail the history, the life of that person, of the Asads, or of the Mubaraks of this world, or whatever it happens to be. And yeah, there's some stuff that happened before that, but it was like Stone Age stuff, You've lost history. And if you've lost history, and you're studying historical texts, you've lost context. And if you've lost context, you've lost the text. If you've lost context, you've lost the text. And if you've lost the text, you've lost the guidance that's contained within it. And if you've lost the guidance, then by definition you're misguided. Okay? So studying history is important. Okay? So we will do that. We'll focus on the Munqidh, his autobiography, because it's his own words. It's his life and his intellectual pursuits in his own words. So we'll have a summary of that. And then the massive bulk of the course will be a book-by-book coverage of the entire Ihya. Right? So we will go through the Ihya book by book. The basis will be the Mukhtasar of Ihya with the regular excerpts from the Ihya itself. The Arabic text of the Mukhtasar is available. I can make that available. How many of you have some competence in Arabic? Any degree of competence in Arabic? Right, not many. Okay. I also have the English PDF. But I would like to get permission from the authors of the English PDF before I send it out to you. Okay? Right. So here's semester 1. This is what we're going to be doing. Sessions 1 to 3. I've said sessions, not weeks. Sessions 1 to 3, Ghazali's life. His life in context, what was happening in the 4th and 5th Islamic centuries, and then Ghazali's literary output and the influence of his works. Sessions 4 to 5, we are going to cover the Munqidh min al-Dalal. Okay, the Munqidh min al-Dalal, the deliverer from error. Ghazali's Apologia. Alright, or Apologia. Sessions 6 to 7 will be an introduction to the Ihya itself, including Ghazali's Dibaja, his introduction to the Ihya. And then from about session 8 we will commence with the Book of Knowledge itself. Alright? What is expected? Regular attendance. As I say, those of you who are from Birmingham, it's not that far. Make the trip. Okay? Talab al-ilm, rihla fi talab al-ilm and all that stuff, yes? Yeah? Traveling to seek knowledge and all that stuff. It doesn't just mean, out my door, down the road, into Sacred House. Alright? You can get in your car and you can come. Alright? Reading ahead. Now, you don't have to worry about that for the time being, but Once we get into the text, reading ahead is important. Then you know what's coming, and you can formulate any questions that you might have. Keeping up with recorded lessons if you miss the lessons. For Arabic students, reading and trying to understand the Arabic texts provided, which will be the Mukhtasar, but also some of the excerpts from the Ihya will pull out as well for you. And of course, for all students to reflect on the wisdom of Ghazali and its relevance to your life. Now, why have we selected this course? I don't know whether it goes like this. No, okay. I need to make this point clear. Why is this course being taught at all? Alright? Why is it being taught at all? You have a right to know why this course is being taught. Right? Since you are going to be attending it. As a student of knowledge, it is very easy to fall into exactly the same traps that Ghazali himself said that he fell into. Okay? Where learning more and more about fiqh, or learning more and more details about Arabic, or learning more and more intricacies of theology becomes the goal. The goal, the whole of the Ihya can be summed up very simply. The purpose of knowledge is to know God. And the Ihya revives the religious sciences because it returns all of the religious sciences back to that one goal. It refocuses you. When we were developing, and there is no work that does so more authoritatively than the Ihya. Alright? When we were looking at the design of the syllabus of the sacred text, I very much wanted to teach Kitab al-Ilm, the first book of the Ihya al-Ulumuddin, because a lot of that refocusing occurs in Kitab al-Ilm. Okay? Kitab al-Ilm will deal with things like what is knowledge, what is fiqh, what is understanding, what is dhikr. These are terms that are used. Who is a faqih? Okay? What are the praiseworthy sciences? What are the sciences that people think are praiseworthy but are not? What are the relative merits of the different sciences? Okay? And when you're a student and you're plunged into the forest of those sciences, all you see are trees. It is very difficult. Who's doing Arabic grammar? Who's doing Arabic grammar? When you're doing Arabic grammar, the most important thing in the world to you is Arabic grammar. It's daraba yadribu. There's nothing more important in the whole of the world than daraba yadribu. You will dream of daraba yadribu. Yeah? One of my friends said to me, I used to sit in my car and I used to say sallallahu ala Muhammad, sallallahu ala Muhammad, sallallahu. Now I sit in my car and I go daraba, daraba, darabu, darabat, darabata, darabna, darabta, darabta. There's nothing more important. When you study fiqh, there is nothing more important to you than exactly how far apart your feet should be in the prayer. Right? And exactly, what type of movement invalidates your prayer. And exactly how much of impurity you're allowed to have on your body. There's nothing more important to you than that. When you study Aqidah, same thing. The same thing happens. Okay? When you're in the forest, you can't see the wood for the trees. And what the Ihya does is it takes a whole step back. Right? Book 1 says, this is what it's all about, guys. This is why you're studying. If you're studying for some other reason, stop. Stop. Refocus. So the Ihya, the book 1 of the Ihya is vital for anyone who wants to sincerely take this road to God through studying. Through studying, it's vital. It's vital because of context and priority. And because of the masterful way that Ghazali does it. Because what you'll find in book 1 is that you'll say, but, and 3 lines later, you'll find Ghazali saying, but, or if you say, but, here's the answer. He's been through it. He's done it already. Okay? So, we spoke about this, and then, the fact is that the rest of the Ihya is also is incredibly useful because it goes through it in detail. And it links the inward life of your spirit with your outward practice. So the first quarter, what's the purpose of the first quarter of the Ihya? To take your worship and link it back to your soul. So not how do you pray with your body. Yes, this is how you pray with your body. But this is how you prostrate your soul before your Lord. That's a different thing. This is how you give charity. Here's the fiqh of how you give charity. But this is how you become a charitable person. This is how you sacrifice of yourself to draw near to your Lord. Right? قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ وَصَدَقَةٌ قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ. Right? That Allah says that, kind words are better than charity that is followed up by insult. Okay? So, you take out some, someone wants some money, and they come, oh, please give me some, please give me some. You've been to various places of the world. Oh, please give me some, oh, please give me some. Oh, come on, please. Oh, there. Yeah? And then you come home and you've got your, how did I do today? I gave some charity today. Yeah? How did you give the charity? In what manner did you give it? That's book 1. Book 2, that's quarter 1. Quarter 2 is about your life in this world. The way you marry, the way you trade, the way you travel, all of those things. Linking those things back to the ultimate purpose. Linking those things back to its ultimate purpose. Okay? And then the second quarter, the second half, the entire second half of the Ihya al-Din is basically a detailed exploration of human psychology. Why do you, the first half of the Ihya, how should you do what you do? The second half of the Ihya, why do you do the things you do? Okay? And it is the best explanation of the motivations and the traits that lead to beneficial actions and to detrimental actions. It is, if you like, the best presentation of the inward sunnah, the fiqh of the heart. Okay? So this is what the Ihya is, and this is its relevance and its importance. So, especially you're a student of knowledge, you want to take this further, this course is essential, which is why your teachers have, commended it to you so strongly, despite the fact that you're going to be taught by me. But you'll have to forgive me. As I say, I'm not teaching, I'm just a muqri. For me, why am I teaching this course? It's a great opportunity to go through the Ihya, so thank you all very much. Because you're the reason I'm going through the Ihya. Alright. Okay, let's move on. Who are we talking about? Hujjatul Islam. Hujjatul Islam means the binding proof of Islam. The binding proof of religion. Ghazali was one of the first people for whom this title was given. He's certainly the first person for whom it was agreed by general consensus. So, what does that mean? There's a difference between Ihsan saying, Doc is Shaykh al-Islam. Thank you very much, Ihsan, for saying it. You didn't say it, but you should have. Never mind. Alright? Doc is Shaykh al-Islam. It's all very well that Ihsan says I'm Shaykh al-Islam, and he puts it up on Facebook. Shaykh al-Islam, Dr. Asim taught the first lesson here today. Alright? Does that make me Shaykh al-Islam? No. Okay? How do you get titles? What is a scholar? That's another question. What's a scholar? Someone said to me once, I remember this, I want to be a scholar. And my question was, define a scholar for me. First tell me what a scholar is, and then I'll tell you how to become one. Right? It's not a badge that you get. Right? You complete you learn how to tie knots, or I suppose as a scholar how to untie knots. Yeah? And you get your badge to get your badge to go in your jacket. I'm now a scholar. It doesn't work like that. Okay? It's all very well to get a title. Is the title when do you deserve that title? And the way it works in Islam, the scholarship, the scholarly tradition is a collegial system. Okay? I'm a doctor. I'm a doctor because I passed an exam. That's why I'm a doctor. But I'm also a specialist psychiatrist. Why am I a specialist psychiatrist? Yes, I did pass an exam. But I didn't become a specialist when I passed the exam. I became a specialist 3 years later. Okay? And I became a specialist, technically, when the Royal College of Psychiatrists, i.e. the Jama'ah of psychiatrists, the group that makes up the psychiatrists of the United Kingdom, felt that I was capable and suitable to be one of their members. So it was by general acclamation. People got, it doesn't happen like this, it happens with a group of them saying yes, but the way it's meant to work is that you are now presented to the College of Psychiatry, and we recommend this person as fit to be a psychiatrist. That is called a collegial system. It's a self-regulating, self-policing system. There are no external, there are external conditions, but there are no external criteria. Okay? Similarly, when you hear that a doctor has done X, Y, and Z and they go to the GMC and they have their license stripped, what's happening there? There is a general agreement from the General Medical Council, which is made up of doctors, to say that this person's competence is so lacking that we are no longer happy to call this person a doctor. Okay? The scholarly tradition works in exactly the same way. When are you a scholar? When scholars say you're a scholar. When are you a Shaykh al-Islam? When the scholars say you're a Shaykh al-Islam. When the collectivity of them say you're a Shaykh al-Islam. Ghazali was, this is debatable, but famously the first figure, and really the only figure in Islam about whom there has been a general consensus that he is Hujjatul Islam, that he deserves the title, the proof of religion. al-Hasan al-Shadhili, and this is a beautiful story. al-Hasan al-Shadhili, the great Sufi master, had a dream, and he dreamt that he was in Bayt al-Maqdis, he was in Jerusalem, and he was in a gathering of the prophets. And the Prophet ﷺ was there, so was Musa alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam and so forth. And Musa alayhi salam, because this is how Musa is, he asked the Prophet ﷺ a question. He said, You said that ulama'u ummati ka'anbiya'i bani Israel, that the scholars of my community are like the prophets of the nabis of the Bani Israel. Where's your dalil, akhi? Where's your proof? And the Prophet ﷺ turns to a man who was in the gathering, and he said, Qum ya Ghazali. Or another narration, Qum ya Aba Hamid. Ghazali, stand. And he said to Musa alayhi salam, here is one of them. Here is one of them. Okay? And this was this amazing dream about the status of Ghazali. That Ghazali was chosen by the Prophet ﷺ as evidence that the scholars of the community do, what does it mean? Are like the Anbiya? You guys done any rhetoric yet? Okay, the word ka, the ka in Arabic is for tashbih. Right? So, inna Zaydan kal asad. Zayd is like a lion. What, does he walk around on 4 limbs? Does he have a very long beard and very long hair? In what way is Zayd like a lion? What is the wajh tashbih? Okay, the wajh tashbih is the nature of the similitude. No, Zayd is like a lion in the sense that he is lazy, lolls around all day, and waits for his wife to bring the food. That's what lions do. It's not meant, that's not what's meant. No, Zayd is like a lion in terms of his courage. Okay? Zayd has courage like a lion. In what way are the ulama of the community of the Prophet ﷺ like the prophets of the Bani Israel? The Anbiya as opposed to the Rusul. Okay, this is Aqidah. You guys done Aqidah? Who's done Aqidah? Who's done Aqidah? Aqidah? No hands going up. Have you guys not done Aqidah? Have you not studied Aqidah? Ya Rab. Okay. Right. There's a difference between a Nabi and a Rusul. A Rusul brings a dispensation from God. He brings a divine law. And Nabi is spoken to by God and calls people back to the Sharia of a previous Rasul. Okay? So, the scholars of the community of the Prophet, the great scholars, the ulama al-Rabbani, the lordly scholars, or the guided scholars of the community of the Prophet ﷺ, are like the prophets of the Bani Israel in the sense that they call people powerfully with ala basiratin, with inspiration, with insight, with guidance from God. They call people back to the Sharia of the previous Prophet, in this case, the Prophet ﷺ, the last of the Prophets. Okay? There are other narrations as well, but this is who Ghazali was. And this is how, this introduction here is the introduction of Shaykh Jibril Haddad, in his biography of Imam Ghazali, which you can make available as well. It's a very good short biography of the Imam. He says, he was Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad Abu Hamid al-Tusi al-Ghazali or al-Ghazzali al-Shafi'i. He lived 450 of the Hijrah to 505, which approximates to around the middle of the 11th century to the beginning of the 12th century. So, yeah, I would say around the time that William the Conqueror was knocking out people's eyes at Hastings, or I should say around the time that William the Conqueror was going around England, cataloguing every single chicken that every single farmer in England had, i.e. the Doomsday Book. Do you know what's called the Doomsday Book? You guys know what the Doomsday Book? The Doomsday Book, yeah? William the Conqueror sent his dudes around to basically catalogue every single possession of every single person in the whole of England, because now, guys, they all belong to me, basically. Alright? It was called the Doomsday Book, because the people felt that Doomsday was coming. It was the reckoning, the hisab that was done in England at that time was like the hisab on the Day of Judgment. It was like the Day of Judgment to come, yeah? But around that time, when that was happening in England, Ghazali was born. Thousands of miles away, Ghazali was born and being raised. Okay, in Khurasan. Khurasan is a wide area, great classical Islamic region. Okay, incorporate now it's modern day Iran, parts of Iraq, parts of the stans, so Uzbekistan and places like that. This is all Khurasan. Okay, and that's where a great center of Islamic civilization. That's where Ghazali was. The binding proof of Islam, ornament of the faith, gatherer of multifarious sciences, the great Siddiq, the absolute Mujtahid, a major Shafi'i jurist, heresiographer and debater, expert in the principles of doctrine and those of jurisprudence, and by agreement the reviver of the 5th century, the 5th Islamic century. Prophet ﷺ says in a well-authenticated hadith, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُ عَلَى رَأْسِ كُلِّ مِئَةِ عَامٍ مَنْ يُجَدِّدُ أَمْرَ دِينِهَا. Allah will send at the beginning of every 100 years one who will revive the religion, one who will revive the affair of the religion. Shafi'i is considered to be one. There are always, there is one or more people, but Shafi'i was considered to be the mujtahid of the 2nd Islamic century, for example. Umar ibn Abi was the mujtahid of the 1st Islamic century, and so forth. But there are always 2 or 3 candidates. There is no debate about who was the mujtahid of the 5th Islamic century. There is no debate. This is agreed by consensus that Imam Ghazali was the mujtahid, was the mujaddid of the 5th Islamic century. His name, and since we're studying him, we should know his name, Abu Hamid. So Muhammad al-Ghazali or Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, as opposed to Ahmad al-Ghazali. Ahmad al-Ghazali, Imam Ahmad al-Ghazali, was his brother, his older brother, who himself was a great scholar and a great spiritual master. Okay? His name is either Ghazali or Ghazal. Now Ghazali means the weaver. Okay? It's the weaver. It's the ism of weaver. it's a noun of occupation. Someone who weaves, who weaves who weaves. I don't know what it's. It's not so. It's not tailoring. Tailoring is something different. Spinning, a spinner. That's it. Someone who, right? Because his father. That's what his father did. His father was a spinner, and so he took the name. However, Ghazali himself says, yeah, and this is narrated by the great hadith master Ibn Salah, the great 6th century hadith master of Damascus, with a pretty solidly authenticated chain of transmission back to the Imam himself. He said, that my name is not Ghazali, it is Ghazali. Because the town, the village in which I was born was Ghazala. And Ghazala was a small village outside Tus. Tus was a regional capital. He said it's a small village outside of Tus. Okay? Nonetheless, there is this difference of opinion. So this is a brief kind of CV. Now, praise of the Imam. He was universally praised in his time. You will come across various aspects of this in his time. We will talk about Abdul Ghafir. I'll do that first actually. That Abdul Ghafir said about him. Abdul Ghafir, we'll come to Abdul Ghafir, but he was a contemporary of the Imam. He studied with him. He was a fellow student with the Imam, and he outlived him by about 20 years. Okay? And this is a really useful biography of the Imam. This is what I say about we have a wealth of information about Ghazali, unlike pretty much any other scholar. Because you have Ghazali's own account of his inward state, his internal life, what he did in his life and so forth. But then you have a contemporaneous account, and not a contemporaneous account of someone who was alive at the time of Ghazali. Okay? It's not like Tacitus writing about some Roman general, or Tacitus writing about Caesar, for example. Okay? He was a student with Ghazali. He studied in the same class as Ghazali. It would be like me writing a biography of Mawlana Sajjad or of Shaykh Shams. It's like that. Okay? And he says, Muhammad ibn Muhammad Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam wal Muslimin, Imamu A'immatid Din, من لم تر العيون مثله لسانا وبيانا ونطقا وخاطرا وذكاء وطبعا. He says, he is Muhammad ibn Muhammad Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, Hujjatul Islam, the proof of religion, wal Muslimin, and the Muslims. Imamu A'immatid Din, the Imam of the Imams of the religion. He is the Imam of the Imams of religion. لم تر العيون مثله. Eyes have not seen the like of him. No eye has seen the like of him. In terms of lisanan wa bayan, in terms of his speech, his explanation, his eloquence, his intellect, or his khatiran is his thoughts, you might say. Yeah, but it means in terms of, again, his quickness of grasping something and his ability to formulate things. وَطَبَعًا, and in terms of his nature. So this is what he says. This is what he says about the Imam. Okay? Ibn Asakir, great historian, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali radiallahu anhu, مجدد أمر الدين في مئة الخامس. He was the reviver. Ibn Asakir said he was the reviver of the 5th Islamic Century. Okay? Ibn al-Jawzi. Now Ibn al-Jawzi was a great Hanbali scholar who took issue with Ghazali on a number of issues. He came about 50 years later. He took issue with Ghazali on a number of issues. But even he says about Ghazali, صنف الكتب الحسان في العصول والفروع التي انفرد بحسن وضعها وترتيبها وتحقيق الكلام فيها. He authored many beautiful books, or many amazing books, in usul, which is the usul, he doesn't mean usul al-fiqh, it means the foundations of the religion. Wal-furu', the derivative aspects of religion as well. التي انفرد بحسن, and they are unique in the beauty of their structure, their ordering, and the explanation or the verification of what he says. Yeah? Let's see. Imam al-Subki It's something very interesting. لا يصل إلى معرفة علم الغزالي بفضله إلا من بلغ أو كاد يبلغ الكمال في عقله. No one can understand the rank of, no one can truly understand the Ghazali's knowledge unless they have reached or almost reached perfection in their own intellect. And that's a fascinating statement, because some of the things that Ghazali was criticized for were criticized because people did not grasp the subtlety of his understanding. Right? They didn't grasp the subtlety of the understanding, and so they said, oh, he means this. He didn't mean that. Yeah? It's very easy to debate. You always win a debate with a dead person. Okay? Always. You always are victorious. In some debates in the subcontinent, you're always victorious anyway. No matter what happens, you're always victorious. You always won. Right? Okay. al-Ghazali huwa al-Shafi'i al-Thani. Ghazali was the second Shafi'i. Ghazali was the second Shafi'i, and this was said by one of Ghazali's students. And this is purely in terms of his fiqh. This is purely in terms of his fiqh, and we'll come to this, but Ghazali was the greatest, the most authoritative figure in the Shafi'i school until the time of Imam Nawawi. So for 300 years, so I'm trying to think of an example. Who's a good example that you know? Okay, it would be like saying he's the second Abu Hanifa. Okay, but Ghazali's position, simply as a jurist, nothing else, just as a jurist in the Shafi'i school, was the equivalent of someone like Imam Qudubi in the Hanafi school. In fact, he probably had a slightly higher position there, but it's that level we're talking about. And that's just in fiqh, not in anything else. And fiqh, he kind of did it on the side. Fiqh was like a hobby. It wasn't his main thing. Scary stuff. He's one of, yeah, okay. Imam al-Dhahabi, great Hanbali scholar of hadith and historian. Dhahabi is interesting because he was a pupil of Ibn Taymiyyah. Right? Ibn Taymiyyah. And Ibn Taymiyyah was a great scholar, there's no question. He had a number of heretical beliefs, but he had big problems with Ghazali on a whole range of issues, especially his advancement of logic. Ghazali wrote 4 books on logic. 4 books on logic, Aristotelian logic. Okay? And really advanced the science of logic. And made it, and more importantly from our perspective, made it very applicable to the religious sciences. Okay, he really kind of said, well, if you don't know logic, you can't be a faqih. If you can't think, because that's what logic is, it teaches you how to think. If you don't know logic, you can't be a faqih. You certainly can't be a theologian. If you don't know logic, just go sit down somewhere, worship your Lord, read Quran, maybe go off for the rest of us. Don't try and be a scholar. If you don't know logic. Okay? Ibn Taymiyyah took issue with this. Ibn Taymiyyah was a great logician himself, interestingly enough, but he took issue with this. Dhahabi was one of his students. Dhahabi was a student of Ibn Taymiyyah, and this is what he says about Ghazali. Abu Hamid, Imam al-Fuqaha al-Itlaq. He was the Imam of the jurists by agreement. By complete agreement, he was the Imam of the jurists. Rabbani al-Ummati bil-Ittifaq. He was the great spiritual guide of this ummah. Again, by complete agreement. Mujtahidu zamanihi. He was the mujtahid of his time. Wa aynu awanihi. He was the source of knowledge in his era. كان شديد الذكاء قوي الإدراك ذو فطنة ثاقبة وغوص على المعاني. He was possessed of incredible intelligence and, an incredibly strong grasp of concepts, a piercing intellect, and he was profound in his understanding of meanings and his explanation of things. Okay, and there are many others. There are many other praises of Ghazali. We won't go. There's just one more I want to mention. I'm trying to find it here. Now, of course, when you're looking for something, you can never find it. It's a statement of one of the later scholars. And he was asked about Ghazali, but what he said is, Muhammad ibn Abdullah is the Imam of the Prophets. He's Sayyid al-Anbiya. He's the master of the Prophets. Wa Muhammad ibn Idris, Sayyid al-Fuqaha. Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i is the leader of the jurists. And Muhammad ibn Muhammad Abu Hamid, Sayyid al-Musannifin. But Muhammad ibn Muhammad al-Ghazali is the master of authors, of the scholars, of scholars who authored. Okay. These are praised. He is praised to the rooftops by Western scholars. Praised to the rooftops by Western scholars. Yeah? I've got some of the stuff, just those who've studied him. And then Orientalists tend not to be particularly complimentary about Muslims as a general principle. D.B. MacDonald. MacDonald was one of the great Ghazalian scholars among the Orientalists. He said, the greatest, this is what he said, not he said, the greatest and certainly the most sympathetic figure in the history of Islam, the only teacher of the later generations ever put by a Muslim on a level with the four great Imams. Montgomery Watt. Ghazali has sometimes been acclaimed in both East and West as the greatest Muslim after Muhammad, and he is by no means unworthy of this dignity. Gibb, the great historian, he was just a scholar of history in general. He wrote The Decline and the Fall of the Roman Empire. A man who stands on a level with Augustine and Luther in religious insight and intellectual vigor. Yeah, this is from a. I won't mention all of them, but it's interesting that the author of this work himself, he reads it and he puts in his introduction, he puts a little thing, and he actually says, just I didn't become Muslim from studying Ghazali. Just. But he says here, I was led back. My reading of Ghazali has made me a better practicing Catholic in the fullest sense of the term. It has not moved me, despite my real admiration and even veneration for Ghazali, to embrace Islam. Rather, it has made me more aware of the great spiritual riches of my own tradition. Yeah? To sum it up, I have found, and I believe others can find, in the words and example of Ghazali, a true ihya, a true revivification, or a bringing back to life. An ihya from the dark, dead coldness of atheism, or more accurately, without godness. An ihya from enervating, debilitating, crippling sinfulness. An ihya from lifeless and spiritless intellectualism. An ihya from tepidity and listlessness and the uncaringness of social and moral mediocrity. Fascinating. Someday, I hope to sit down with the Ghazali in a quiet corner of heaven. So he's saying, inshallah, Allah give him tawfiq and maybe he will. We'll have many things to talk about, if indeed in heaven one can be distracted from the vision of God. I shall want to thank him and so many others of his co-religionists, such as Rabia al-Basri, Bistami and al-Hallaj. Let me conclude by saying the time is gone, but the man remains, and will remain for you, for me, and for all men. And that is a fair play. This is why we're spending a bit of time talking about him. The reason he has that effect is that he's so honest. Right? I've read a lot of biographies in my time. And most of them are types of things that we've read. Lots of praises. He's the great Imam. He's the scholar of his era. He's the ornament of faith. He's this, he's that. And then he did this, and he did that, then he wrote this, and he did that, then he wrote this, and he did that, then he did that, and then he died. May Allah have mercy on his soul. And you never really get a sense of what was he like. Ghazali, because of his honesty, and he's not just honest in the Munkar, in his autobiography, he's honest in the Ihya. He'll say things in the Ihya, and he says, you know, I struggled with this. I didn't really get this. I used to be really arrogant. I used to think people were beneath me because I was so intelligent. Allah gave me such an intelligence, yeah, that I was able to dismiss the arguments of my opponents. Yeah. And now I've realized how wrong all that was. Yeah. So you really get a sense of this. That's why they talk about the sympathetic nature of the sympathetic nature of the. Okay. So let's leave it there for today, inshallah. We will go through this, and I want you to understand it. So we'll go through his life, just to give you. We'll mention a few of these things quickly, I think, so that you have an idea. But what we'll do is the next session we're going to go through, as I say, the earliest biography of Ghazali, written by his contemporary, and we'll do it in Arabic and in English. Abdul Ghafir al-Farisi. But the main sources of knowledge about Ghazali's life are those that are contemporaneous, the Munqidh, his own work as we've mentioned, the Tarikh an-Nisapur, the history of Nisapur, and Abdul Ghafir al-Farisi, who was a great scholar himself, has a long entry on Ghazali in there. And then other accounts from his students, from contemporary scholars of his time, and so forth. In terms of later biographies, there are around 40 biographies of Ghazali's life. The greatest of them, without question, is the biography from the Tabaqat al-Shafi'iyyah al-Kubra, the great chronology of the Shafi'i scholars written by Imam Tajuddin al-Subki, and his entry on Ghazali in the 5th volume runs to 50 pages. Okay, which is a long biography for a compendium of biographies. That's a long biography. And the Siyar A'lam al-Nubala of Imam al-Zahabi, another great work. In modern times, there are many works written on Ghazali's life. I've mentioned this one. I've mentioned this one here as well. Any of Shaykh al-Hakim Murad's works, T.J. Winter's works, will have a good introduction to Ghazali. Okay, and we're very blessed in the sense that we have a lot of modern, sympathetic, and academically and Islamically sound translations of Ghazali's works. So Ghazali has benefited tremendously, and part of that is because of himself. He was a very clear thinker. It's very difficult to misinterpret Ghazali because he's so clear and clarifying in his speech and what he says that he doesn't leave much interpretation room for interpretation. If you compare the modern English works on Ghazali to the modern English works on Ibn al-Arabi, the other great Sufi master who was about 100 years later, Ibn Arabi has been pretty comprehensively misunderstood. Sympathetically misunderstood, but still misunderstood. Right? Which is why it's actually quite difficult to recommend a work of Ibn Arabi for people to read. Yeah? Whereas with Ghazali, anything that looks a bit like this, really, you can pick it up and just buy it. Yeah? And you will find books, there's about 5 or 6 books of the Ihya that have been translated. Okay? Another very valuable resource is Sheikh Abu al-Huda Muhammad al-Yaqubi, who has he taught the first half of Kitab al-Ilm, about maybe a third of it. I think it was probably about 7-8 years ago that he taught it, but it's out. I mean, it's probably available on Sacred Knowledge in these places. The Book of Knowledge CD set. The first 2 CDs are very good history. I mean, I listened to it 2 or 3 times. It's a very good history of Ghazali. Puts things into context. Very good history of his life. Those of you who want something a bit more challenging in Arabic, Sirat al-Ghazali wa Aqwal al-Mutaqaddimin fihi by Uthman Abdul Karim was a work that was put together. Basically, he took all the biographies of Ghazali, put them together, put a whole lot of other stuff in there as well. Very useful kind of digest on Ghazali's life and his thought. It was put together and was presented in Damascus in the 60s around the 900-year anniversary of Ghazali's life. Okay, so that's a useful resource as well. We'll do this next week, inshallah. in terms of Ghazali's life, you've got 4 phases of his life. So this is how I want you to frame what you'll read about in his biography. Okay? There are basically 4 phases. There's Ghazali as student, from about 450 when he was born up to about the year 478 when his main teacher, Imam Abu Ali al-Juwayni, Imam al-Haramayn, passed away. Then Ghazali as teacher stroke superstar, because that's what he was. Teachers, the great teachers, were superstars. You're reading his biography, that when he went to Baghdad and he started teaching in Baghdad, his retinue, his entourage, means the people that kind of hung around him, his lectures, that kind of stuff, was larger than the entourage of the Khalif. It was larger than the entourage in the Darul Khilafah. Right? He was massive. Massive. And that's the reason that we're studying him. Not because he was massive, because that was only the second phase of his life. Because then he took it and he chucked it away. Because he wanted to find God. Ghazali got the world in his hand. He had the ear of the rulers of his time. His word was, later on, he would hear in far-flung corners of the Muslim world, قال al-Ghazali, قال al-Ghazali. Yeah? Yeah? People taking his name, they're not knowing he was sitting there, taking his name. He threw it all away. He put it all behind him. Because he said, I'm not finding God. How do I find God? And that is Ghazali as the ascetic. That is Ghazali as the man in search of God. Ghazali the salik, the seeker. And then the last phase of his life, last few years of his life, Ghazali the sought. Ghazali the master. Okay? So these are the phases of his life, inshallah. We will look at them as we go through. Next week, inshallah, I'll give you a quick overview of his life. This is available for download, and we can send it out as well, so it's fine. Quick timeline of his life. Alright? We'll go through it. We'll go through the biography of Imam al-Farisi. And hopefully we can start to take a look at the historical context. Alright? That is to say, what was happening in the world at his time. We're going to talk about Tus, and we're going to talk about Nisapur, and talk about, Muaskar and Baghdad, and what were all these places? Okay? Hopefully, inshallah, you guys will get a bit of a sense of the Muslim world in the 4th and 5th century. It's very relevant to what he talks about. I hope that I will see your faces for at least the next year. Hopefully longer. But for this whole journey. And Ghazali did us the great favor of writing his entire journey down. We're going to undertake that journey. Okay? And we undertake it together. I want to thank you for attending, those of you who are online as well as those who are here, because, from a purely selfish perspective, you've given me the opportunity to do this. I would probably be reading it here if you didn't have this class, but I wouldn't be reading it with anywhere near the same level of intensity if it wasn't for you guys. So they say that, the adab of the student is to feel that they're indebted to the teacher. The adab of the teacher is to feel that they're indebted towards the students. So barakallahu feekum to all of you. And we will see you again next week. Jazakumullah khair. Sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.